Welcome to the meeting room at Global TV Talk Show, a broadcast service of globalbusinessnews.net.
Now, here's your host, Ed Cohen.
This is Ed Cohen, and you're in the studio of globalbusinessnews.net. And we're on Global TV Talk Show. Our special guest again is author Steve Cadigan. And you can see the title of his book behind, A Work-Quake. Do you happen to have the book handy? You could stick it up to the camera?
Yes, I do. Here.
Oh, cool. Well, now's the time.
There
And
it is, right here. Super simple, quick read. I'm told on Audible you can listen to it in about 5 hours.
cool. So I welcome you again. We did an interview with you a few months ago when the book first came out. And so I was wondering how your life has changed and how you think the business world has changed for the worse or the better. And are your thoughts in the book being actualized?
Well, I tell you what, Ed, my life, I don't think has changed drastically. I think that, having launched my first book here, I definitely spent a lot more time doing things I haven't done a lot of, which is be on shows like this, hosting podcasts and being a guest on a number of podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
What I hadn't anticipated was spending about 2.5 years to write the book. I plan to write another book. I don't think it's going to take me 2.5 years, but I'm ready to talk about something different in the book I spent 2.5 years writing. And yet there's a lot of interest in the topic. And what I didn't anticipate in writing the book was obviously the pandemic. And right when I'd finished it, the pandemic hit and I had to revisit any book in the future work that doesn't account for the pandemic would have been a real miss. So I revisited some of the latter chapters and the conclusion. And what I found is that a lot of the projections that I had around where business was heading have just been accelerated because of the pandemic. And unfortunately for a lot of leaders, there are just so many things to distract them and to challenge them that it's hard times for any leader. And if I was in an operating role, it would be hard times for me too. You have so many new challenges on so many new fronts that you haven't faced before. You have a new psychology of the workforce. You have health challenges that are intervening in your capability of how to organize where your people are going to get work done in new ways. You have people making new career choices and taking new career paths. You have the highest number of resignations we've seen since we've been tracking it, particularly in the United States. We have the highest number of new startups, people going in different directions and owning their own path. So it's been a challenge. And I think I can say this with a higher degree of certainty than 6 months ago. I think we finally hit a point where most leaders are not waiting for the pandemic to be over, and they're recognizing that their agility and their adaptability is the right course. And so that's encouraging for me because that's where I like to play, which is in let's pioneer some new strategies and some new ways of building a better future of work and not hold our breath waiting for a return to the way it was, because that's never coming back. Even if the pandemic is completely diminished in terms of the health risk for workers, people have shifted their ways of thinking about their lifestyles. And that's not going to change.
Yeah, I'm happy about that. Steve?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think one of the things that I've been talking to leaders about lately is that play off what Steve just said is the employees, the workforce have changed their thinking, not only about their lifestyles, but also about work and what the value they bring to work, what the purpose of work is and what the meaning of work is in their lives. So if the workplace has changed its thinking, leaders have to change their thinking. Because you can't use old style thinking with the new style of workforce, the way the workforce is thinking. So I totally agree with them.
Yeah, I riffed off of a very famous quote from Jack Welch, which is, if the outside world is changing faster than inside your company, the end is near. And I say, if the employee is changing faster than your talent strategies are changing, the end is near. And so I think this is hard for a lot of leaders, and I'll explain a little bit, which is how people are thinking about their relationship to work, as Steven said, is massively changing. It's not changed, it's changing. We're still going through it right now. And if you're using the same model to recruit, to retain, to communicate, to organize that you used for the last 50 years, I think that's a real missed opportunity. And the challenge for a lot of leaders is there's no benchmarking right now. Like, hey, who's doing something really good with how should we work at home, hybrid, back to the office? And I'm telling people, like, now's not the time to benchmark. Now's the time to become the benchmark and to experiment and to learn and listen to your employees and to devise the right framework for you that's going to work for you. And even if you're in the same industry as a company that you've been measuring yourself against, they have a different demographic of people. They have a different, set of needs that they need to address. So even if it's the same size company you're looking at, the same industry, you may need to take a different approach because your people may have different needs.
So what about communications with the workforce? Is it like town hall time on Zoom every week?
I think it's more than that. I think if you're doing an annual survey for your employees, you're not surveying your employees. I've been saying that for years. I don't know what the right cadence is, but I think it has to be a lot more frequent than it was. The biweekly staff meeting or the quarterly all hands. I've talked with leaders in the past. They said, my team doesn't have a sense of urgency. And I said, well, how often do you meet as a company? Oh, once a quarter. I go, well, if you want to raise this level of urgency, I have two suggestions. Start meeting monthly and then go to biweekly, but have your leaders hold up their goals to the whole company and tell them how they're doing to their goals. And that's going to raise a level of accountability and raise a level of cadence when people have to be accountable to the whole organization. Because when you can hide behind a quarterly meeting and it's all really just financial results, you're really missing that chance to sort of hold people's feet to the fire and raise a level of pace. But we have to build this frequency. And that was happening before the pandemic. We have many new startups out there that are pulsing, that are surveying. And I think there's a traditional view on employee surveys, which is, if I'm a leader, I don't want to do that because it means more work for me. If I have to do a survey, I'm going to have to do stuff. And the point now is, it's not about doing stuff. It's about the recognition that the psychology of the workforce is changing and you need to listen more carefully. And we have new things. I mean, imagine this. 2 years ago, when you would say, Ed, hey, team, you got a team at 25. Hey, we're going to have a staff meeting, building 5, conference room 22 at 2:00 tomorrow. And everyone's like, okay, we'll be there. Now it's like, well, my kid's sick at home and I don't think I want to go to that meeting and bring those germs home, or I don't want to bring his germs into the staff meeting, so I'm not going to that meeting. We never had to account for an individual's personal safety definition or circumstances, and now we do. And that's just I'm worried about my kids' education at home. I'm worried about the safety of my parents. That's going to govern my level of productivity. So I, as a leader, need to know where your head's at. And that means more communication and deeper communication about who you are. And that's what I love about where we could head, which is a greater human connection with our employees rather than where's your goals, results, what's going on. We got to know the person a little bit more because it matters now more than ever.
Steve Howard, wouldn't you agree that when Steve Cadigan's using the word cadence, it's not a drum beat, but the tone and the voice from below is cascading, right, or into a deafening Niagara Falls roar. And what are we going to do about it? What are they going to do about it? What do you think?
I totally agree. And I would tie in what you just said, because too many people think in the workforce cadence like beating drums and moving forward, and it's action, action, action. You just use the word listening. And I think you have to have a listening cadence to people. And, I've been preaching now for the last year or so, when you do have your one-on-ones with somebody, I don't care if you talked to them 3 days ago, your first question, particularly if they're remote, should be, how's your family doing? How's the family doing with lockdown? How's the family doing with schooling? Whatever it might be. your wife, and then secondly, how are you doing? You can't let them just say I'm fine and let them get away with it. And you've got to watch the body language, pick up the tonality, and see if they're really fine or not. And then the third question is, let's talk about work. How's your project going? And that, Stephen said, making that human connection. He said you got to have a greater human connection. It has to start with those one-on-one conversations.
Mm-hmm. Right. How are you doing? And what can I do to help you?
And what can I do to help you?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And
So-
you can't just let people get away and say nothing. You've got to dig. I mean, but the leaders in their 40s and 50s and early 60s haven't been taught this. They haven't been taught how to empathize. They're uncomfortable with these conversations, many of them. And I don't want to say they're afraid of them, but they're uncomfortable with them. And so they're reluctant to have them, or they'll have them quickly, like a check box. Okay, I asked you, how you doing, Steve? Great. Okay, how's your family? Excellent. Okay, now about that project we're working on. It's not a tick box. It's not a checkbox exercise.
Yeah.
And people have to get comfortable with that. And I think slowly but surely, a lot of people will. Some won't. And they're the ones you're going to keep seeing. They're going to see greater resignations in their staff, greater movement in their staffs than the people who do make those human connections.
Yeah. And Ed, I would offer, to iterate and further what Stephen's saying. I think the paradigm of leadership is that all leaders should have the answers. And in a massively uncertain path that we're all walking right now, you don't have all the answers, and it's okay. And it's actually going to engender more trust and respect if you're honest and say, listen, I've never been in this place before. You haven't either. Let's try to do our best to learn and to, adjust and course correct as soon as we learn new things. And it's a moment of vulnerability, but which I think builds followership now, rather than trying to pretend that what's going on. You just don't. And I'm reflecting on when we were growing the LinkedIn business back in 2009, 2010, and things were changing so fast that we really didn't have. We were in a new market, we're in a new business, and things were changing quickly. And what we found when we were onboarding, hundreds of people a month, is that we had to move from, we knew what we were doing, to, hey, how can we help you onboard yourself faster? And we turned it on to them to onboard themselves. And here's the map, and here's where we need you to figure out how to get to. But every policy in the company was changing, so we went to come here and make our culture better, instead of here's the culture, study up and understand what the tablets are. And I think that was a scary moment for me as a classically North American trained HR leader, which is, you don't let the employees determine what the culture is. Only bad things are going to happen. And I honestly think the younger generation would rather be invited to help build a culture than be told what it is. And having sat at the table with an executive team when we were giving them some soft clay and say, okay, help us make this culture better. And what can we do? Because if it wasn't good, they would leave and go next door. And that's what we're seeing now at scale. Yeah. And that's hard for hospitality, which has never had to learn how do I attract and become a preferred place to work when I'm not a destination place of employment. I'm a transition. Someone's going to work here for a shorter period and they're going to go somewhere else. So how do I build a great experience, because they've got a lot of choice now and I need to be more attractive? And they haven't, as Stephen said, they haven't been taught how to do that, and they haven't had to do that. And now they have to.
So if I can just blurt out something, that are the workers in this new realm, are they thinking that, now is my chance to get something from the boss? And is the boss worried that she is positioning themselves for trouble? Or that's what you're saying, just deal with it?
Well, I would say it like this. I mean, is there a portion of the population thing that, yeah, I think what we're seeing more is, wow, I learned during the pandemic that some new things are important to me, like my freedom, autonomy, independence, and being able to go to the grocery store when I want to and get my hair done when I want to. That's really very valuable to me. That time with my family that I had, I don't want to give that up. And I have leverage now to be able to find a place if my employer is not ready to do that, or I have an increased will to act on that maybe I wasn't as comfortable acting on before. And I'm willing to take that take that leap, if you will, that in a surplus of talent market, I wasn't able to do, and I didn't have the leverage. So I'm seeing that play out. We're already seeing, wages go way up. Like all those big, huge companies that had all those lobbyists to keep the minimum wage low, they're all jacking up their salaries now. Sorry. They've moved all the money to the lobbyists keeping the minimum wage low to lobbyists or to people to try to make their culture better. It's a different challenge.
It is, and it's going to be more acceptable. I remember I told Ed the story a few weeks ago. In 1977, 78, I was working in Texas. And, I grew up in Las Vegas, so I have kind of a different attitude. And I went and got my hair cut one day, about 1 o'clock, 1:30 in the afternoon, came back at 2:30 or something. And my partner next to me, same age, he was born and bred in Texas. He looked at me and said, "Did you get a haircut?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "On company time?" I go, "It grows on company time." But that was so unacceptable to do anything personal in your life. And, and also, I'd probably just spent a Saturday and Sunday being the new kid on the block working all weekend. I was working 70-hour weeks or whatever. So as most young people do, particularly back then. But I think it's going to be more socially acceptable when you have to say, "No, look, I can't attend the 4:30 meeting. I got to pick my kids up from daycare, or I got to take my children to music lessons, or I have to, or I've got to go see my elderly parents before, the closing thing, if they're in a care facility or something." And I think not only bosses, but peers will be receptive to that, understand that. And the point I want to make here is that before the pandemic, I think a lot of people realize, okay, everyone has a life outside work. What I think now people will understand is that everyone has responsibilities outside work. And if they're taking care of those responsibilities and still getting their job done, then it's going to be, okay, yeah, fine, we'll see you tomorrow, or whatever it happens to be. But I think that's changed.
And what makes this really hard, Ed, is that there's we as Americans over here, we really like to point the finger. Like, who's to blame? Like, what's the cause? There's 40 causes right now. There's the pandemic. There's the burnout issues where people are getting fried. There's this wave, which I talk about in Work-Quake, of, robots, AI, automation's going to take your job. And then leaders like, "Well, why are people quitting?" I'm like, "Because you're scaring the hell out of them. Like, you're telling them you're going to do a digital transformation, and you're talking about the technology more than you talk about them and their future. What do you expect they're going to do?" And so all that stuff was setting the kindling on the fire, if you will. And the pandemic comes in, and it's like, there's a whole bunch of new stuff. And people are living longer, and people are not seeing Social Security is going to necessarily be there to help them in their retirement years. Healthcare is still not organized to be affordable here. It's a whole bunch of new stuff. And then you've got all kinds of platforms like gig work, where people can not have to work for an employer. They can have a patchwork of things. You have a greater migration of people doing independent contractor work, and more platforms like Upwork and Fiverr that allow people to showcase themselves and find work without having to work for a company per se. There's so many things that are part of this, right? That you can't just point your finger on one.
Oh, that's really clear. Thank you. Stephen?
Yeah.
No, I think it's absolutely true. Forget who I was talking to or where I read it, or maybe I was just thinking to myself, but, the old style was we sold our time as employees, 8 to 5, 5 days a week, roughly. The employer told us where we were going to work from. We had to show up, and the reluctance, going back to what I was just talking about, the reluctance to have a personal phone call, the reluctance to sneak away for a dentist appointment, much less your child's dentist appointment.
Right.
The pressure was on, right? And now I think the rethinking about what does work mean and where does work fit in my lifestyle for many people is, what? I want that flexibility. I want to work in an environment where I don't have to sneak around. I don't have to make an excuse. I don't have to call in sick for the whole day simply because I have to take my child to a dental appointment or an orthodontist appointment or something. I can just say, I'm going to be gone for 2 hours at my child's orthodontist appointment. Previously, you had to take a sick day in many companies, and you won't have to do that. We're not selling our time anymore. We're selling our services.
Yeah.
And I think, and the other thing I think will change, hopefully, and I used to laugh. I had a friend of mine on his computer. He had a little button. So if the boss walked by, he hit a button, up bounced an Excel spreadsheet. So it looked like he was working.
Yeah.
But
We've
in
got
honest-
one of those on LinkedIn too, so that you hear your boss coming quickly. It goes to a website like purchasing a gift for your boss.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But what's wrong with sitting when you're back in the workplace? And
Yeah.
what's wrong with sitting in your chair, looking out the window, thinking? Because aren't so many of the people we hire supposed to be doing thinking work? They're supposed to be doing strategies and planning and contemplating. And, I think we've got to get away from the fact that we have to look busy. I mean, thinking is busy work, but it's a mind shift change. We'll see what happens.
Isn't that powerful? So one thing I want to throw on the table and get your guys' reaction on, which just absolutely elevated this Work-Quake, if you will, for lack of a better word, is Germany last week announced that for the foreseeable future, they're aggressively seeking to hire 400,000 immigrant knowledge workers in their economy because the vitality of their economy is at risk because of shortage of talent. That's Germany, okay? They're not a country, and neither are we, that's really overly welcoming to immigrant labor. And now they're saying we're going to put 400,000 a year to go after knowledge workers, and we're going to become so now because people can be more comfortable hiring people remotely. Now it's game on, And so, what are you going to do? Like what I would do if I have a company not in Germany, I would say, guess what? We're going to put an office in Germany. If they're going to want a bunch more people there, I'm going to take advantage of those tax breaks. I'm going to take advantage of all kinds of other benefits. I'm going to have to put an office there, if that's how it's going to go. Traditionally in Europe, Ireland was the country that a lot of the other European nations were really trying to break their tax code because they had lowered the tax rate. And so many US multinationals set up their European headquarters there, not because there was great people or great airports or big cities with great, customer demand, is because of the tax benefits. And so now that's going to be sort of the domino. So someone else is you think UK is just going to sit there and go, oh yeah. And this is sort of post-Brexit. I would not want to be in parliament right now. It's like, hey, Germany just said they're going to hire. And so what are you going to do? Do you think there's an oversupply of talent in the UK? Post-Brexit, they've had a shortage and it's been really hard. So now what's going to happen? This is really, unbelievable, the magnitude of this. And then you've got, while that's happening, smaller countries that have more, let's say, an advantage of environment, like say Greece or Costa Rica, and Portugal, they've already lowered their tax bases and said, if you come here and you bring your digital nomad self to our shores, we're going to let you live here tax-free for 2, 3, 5 years, not have to pay anything. And you're like, whoa. So, and then Spain just passed a huge change in their tax leniency on startups. It used to be 15,000 euros, and now you can start a business in Spain and write off the first 50,000. And so, again, another incredibly conservative country when it comes to startups and sort of very suspicious towards business. And if you're not a social servant, you're not really doing good things. Now they're turning too. So we're going to see a huge sea change at the government level, which is going to drive lots of different behaviors, which is really fascinating. We're not sure how it's going to play out, but man, if you're a company and you're worried about talent and you're just looking in your own city, it's a global phenomenon right now, right?
And just this week, just in the since Friday, I think, the U.S. has begun to loosen up suddenly their green card thing for spouses of immigration tech people,
or for STEM workers,
making it easy to, and that is the first step towards. If you've got a tech background and you want to pay American taxes and you're going to make enough money to buy a house and buy goods and help our economy, come on over.
Yeah, the other area is going to benefit is down where I am, down in Latin America, because of the knowledge workers here and the salaries here. I've got a partner in the UK, and he's just hired a lady in Colombia. to be like the administrative manager for small business startup that in the UK, but now he's got a full-time staff in Colombia, and he's looking at another one here in Mexico because I've actually introduced him to somebody. And again, you can't even look not just your own city, your own country, but if you want knowledge workers, and talk about Spain. I mean, Spanish fluency throughout Latin America, of course, is that's where they'll go searching for talent is down here.
Right. And I'm not surprised to hear that. I was just in Bogota about 3 months ago, Stephen, and they're really, I mean, this is a situation where we don't have an ability to grasp as Americans, which is, here's a country that can change the dials of their whole economic policy and many things very, very quickly from one, administration to the next. And they're really concerned that a lot of their talent's not just working for other countries, but leaving to other countries. And this is the problem that I found when I was hired by the city of Barcelona a number of years ago. And they said, our talent's leaving. I said, where's it going? It's going to Germany. I go, why? You have one of the most beautiful cities in the world. And they said, yeah, our economic policy. It's just, we're not able to get the startups to get, the tax laws and employment laws are just not supportive of that. So people are leaving because they feel they can make more and move their careers faster in another place. And I said, wow, that's a real missed opportunity. And so I'm curious because I see a lot of really good engineering talent in Argentina, Buenos Aires. I don't know what's going on down there in Argentina, but there's some really good talent that's starting to surface, and a lot of small team acquisitions I'm seeing in that part of the world. And so, and I think Colombia is trying to figure out how do we play in this. Like maybe they become like Romania has done a really good job of becoming a second source hub for like, hey, we've got an engineering team. We'll just be over here working for you.
The back office.
Yeah.
But some companies don't get it, Steve. There's a company, and I won't name it, but there's a company that I do some consultancy work through or some contracting work through. And they have these policies. You have to be based in the country. You have to live in the country, and they contract you through their country office. So they've lost a really good person who happens to be half German, half Spanish, but she was living in Portugal. They don't know how to deal with that. They don't know how to deal with me. Now, fortunately, I still have a company in California, so I can get away, but I'm living in Mexico, and they really don't know what to do with me half the time. They've lost another person, a British guy, who's living in Costa Rica. And so those of us who are semi-digital nomads, or some of these people, some of these young people that we work with, these producers are true digital nomads. There's another one from Portugal's living in Mexico right now. And they don't know, it doesn't fit their policies, it doesn't fit their procedures, and they're losing some really good talent, and it's going to impact their clients. And so it's not just countries that have to get their hands around this, it's companies as well. And this is a global, you'd recognize the names, one of the top global companies in the world.
I'm not surprised. And this is why when people come to me and say, Steve, we have a recruiting problem. And I said, no, you don't. You have a creativity problem.
Policy problem.
If you believe the only way to create value is by owning an employee, you're really missing out. And I know it's the intellectual property lawyer's nightmare come true, but and I think I said this on your show last time, but I want to repeat if I did, which is, let's look at the region of the world that has produced the highest number of high valued, outperforming organizations on the planet by a country mile, and that's Silicon Valley. It also happens to be the part of the world that has the highest turnover. Those two are connected. Because ideas are iterating and networks are growing and people are learning from one another. It's a beautiful laboratory of new ideas and innovation, not because people are stuck in the same company for 20 years, because they're not. And that's when I'm telling people, like, why are you so afraid of turnover? Why are you so afraid of a new model? Look at the craziness of Silicon Valley and the disproportionate value that's being created there. You need to open up your thinking here. I was with another huge company that everyone would know if I mentioned them. And they say, when you leave our company, no one talks about you anymore. It's like heresy. I'm like, instead of, I said, do you feel that your turnover is going to increase in the future? Oh, yeah. So why don't you have that alumni community be a source of value to you rather than the defector? Like there's an article that the Wall Street Journal put out recently about this defection from Morgan Stanley, all these people defecting. I'm like, what are you talking about? Morgan Stanley never, or maybe it was Amazon. I don't remember. Like defecting. What are you talking about? Like, when a company fires people, what are they, ripping up the green card? Like, what are you talking about? It's just not. That's a broken model that you're thinking about. It's not how it is today.
So it's a boardroom thing.
It's a boardroom to a first line supervisor thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's a supervisor thing on up to the boardroom thing. It goes both ways. Yeah.
Yeah. And here's how I'd frame it, because it's a good call out. We could even get to the investor thing, which is a whole nother thing. If we look at the better.com situation and how just the ethics of investing. But here's what, and this is not to point fingers or blame or cast aspersions to board. I'm on 3 boards. What most boards want is predictable, reliable outcomes. I want to know that the investment money is going to realize a good return for my investors. So I want to be sure of things, which then leads to the longer people stay, the more consistent the outcome I can predict to be realized, right? So that's that. But today, I would say that a company's performance is more driven by how well you can respond to unpredictability and instability than building for predictability, right? And that gets me to Tesla. In the automobile industry today, the most valuable company in the world is not the most profitable. It's not the one that sells the most cars. It's not the one run by a normal conservative CEO. It's Tesla. And they have a value today, a market worth more than Ford, Honda, Toyota combined. And their tenure is shorter and much lower than all the other automobile companies. I think General Motors is running around 5.2, which is the lowest in the automobile industry. And so why is the investor community voting that Tesla is the bet for the future? Because they believe people who are not from the automobile industry, who can think differently, who can innovate faster, and are not stuck in this is the only way we can do it. Right. And so we're starting to have a more, I think, examples of new models. And that's not to say Tesla's perfect. It's not to say Silicon Valley's perfect. There's a lot of things that aren't. But, you can't argue that, look at the market saying here. And so I would say boards, are going to have to reconcile and get comfortable with a new reality and building for winning in an unstable, uncertain environment, which is uncomfortable. But that's the world that we're in. And things aren't going to get more certain in the future. They're going to continue to be more and more foggy and uncertain. And so the faster you can move as a company to sort of take advantage of a new opportunity or an insight from your market research, I think the better your chances of thriving today. And that means new people and new ideas are a strength, and moving people around in your company. And Stephen, I mean, I know what you're thinking is like, I know all my customers that I'm dealing with too, that are really like, I don't want to hear that. You're probably right, but I'm not ready to operationalize that kind of model.
No, and if you're not, you be successful for the next 2, 3, 4 years, maybe, but
right.
long term,
right.
you're not going to have a sustainable growth, sustainable fee. And also, the comment I keep making to people right now is it's semi-frustrating, is that you can't grow your business when your number one priority, when you come into work on Monday morning, your number one priority is replacing lost workers. If you got to spend all that time recruiting and onboarding and everything else, how are you going to grow your business?
Right.
In honesty, you're just, and when you lose 8% of your, one of the people I work with lost 8% of the workforce just in the IT department over the last 12 months. And they were happy because on an industry basis, going back to benchmarking, the industry basis was like 14 or 15%. So they thought they were doing better, but still you got to replace 8% of your workforce. They have, about 200 people in the IT department. So that's 16 people a year that they're having to replace and onboard. And while they're doing all that, the remainder of the people have to pick up the slack because goals don't reduce. Timelines don't get lengthened. You've got to do more with less. And that's no way to grow your business.
Yeah, I had a really great debate conversation with a gentleman who runs a company that's really helping to optimize for using contract workers in your business. And instead of just helping with the payroll and recruiting of contractors, it's really like, hey, we're gonna match you with great contractors, and we're going to grow your contractor workforce. And one of the big challenges that a lot of executives are facing today is, well, if I have a bunch of contractors, I mean, what kind of culture is that? I got a bunch of I'm being a little more crude than is true, but I got a bunch of mercenaries. Don't really care. They're not invested in the long term. And his answer, this guy I was talking to said, well, what kind of culture is it where everyone's got to do 3 jobs? What kind of culture is it where all these open positions are left open and people are dying, and that's a very strong point, which is, we've got to be more creative. Our job's not to create value with full-time employees. Our job is to create value. And that means we should look to all kinds of different ways to do that. And we have to be, the urgency and the limited supply of talent is going to force people to be more creative. It has to. You're going to have to do, get more comfortable with remote work, get more comfortable with independent contractors, get more comfortable with different, outsourcing, teams, and see what works and what doesn't work, because you're not going to. And then and this is the biggest one, if you're a medium to large size enterprise, which I still see companies just not figuring out, is you're going to have to get into the grow business, not the buy business. You're going to have to build your talent instead of always shopping when someone goes, and you're going to have to limit your exposure of a single point of failure if a key employee leaves. I'll give you a great story. I was in Atlanta about 6 months ago and talking to a company that's in the manufacturing realm. They make a lot of the packaging for snack foods and chips around the world. And I was talking to their head of manufacturing, and he looked like he was ready to check into a hospital with, high blood pressure and stress. I said, what's on your mind? He goes, oh my gosh, I can't keep my frontline manufacturing staff. And some of the guys that takes about 6 years to learn how to work these machines are leaving after like 7 or 8 years. So I'm just getting hammered. And I said, why would anyone, I said, no disrespect here, but isn't that kind of on you that if someone needs 6 years to learn how to do something and they leave after the 7th year, it would suggest you might want to re-engineer that job so that 5 people do it, and it only takes about 3 months to learn a portion of that job rather than one person sick. And this is another thing. We have to re-engineer work to expect people are going to not be, oh my gosh, Steven quit, but oh no, Ed quit. Like, they're going to. Okay, so don't be surprised. Build a model that accounts for that, so you don't get hurt.
You build a model that is geared to welcoming, to attract a gig worker.
Yes. Yeah.
Build a model that attracts, but also don't have every one of your benefits designed to keep people, like hold people, or we call them golden handcuffs. And I used those words back in the day, so I'm guilty as charged. But I think we have to. What talent wants is to be made better for tomorrow. And so if you are investing them and growing them, and making it more easy for them to leave, I think they're going to stay with you, because that's what they're measuring. Where can I create the greatest value for myself in the future? Where can I become more valuable, learn new things, and be in a culture? And yes, culture is still important. Be in a culture where I feel good and right. All those things, and we've never had, at a scale that we're facing today, that urgency in so many different industries right now. And that's why all of us are super busy, because people are like, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? I'm having a huge 2-hour session next week on Monday with a massive organization, but 30,000 person financial services company that was built on, these are our offices and this is where we go and this is what we do. And now they're like, oh, we're going to have to figure out how we keep our culture in a more remote world. And I said, I'm sorry, but I'm not your guy if that's what you want. I want you to first acknowledge the culture you had is gone. You're going to have to rebuild something. And what I want you to do is answer, how do we keep having culture be our competitive advantage? That's the question you need to answer, not how do we keep our culture? Because your culture is already different. Yeah. And so I said, oh, we've been hiring, letting people work from home. We've been hiring remote workers. And I said, let me ask you a question. How many of your remote worker, quote unquote, remote workers have you hired are far away from all your offices? Yeah, none. So you've already been hiring people to work from home, but you're still playing to, we're coming back to the office. They're like, well, yeah.
But that answers your earlier question to the other gentleman. What kind of culture will I have if I have gig workers? It's the culture you create. And look, I consulted to, and I will mention the company now, MasterCard, when I lived in Asia. And I was an outside consultant. There were a lot of us that MasterCard brought in as they were growing the business in Asia. Man, we felt like a family. That the leader, the two leaders there, Jim Casson and Andrei Sekulich, they built a culture that made it inclusive. Nobody treated us like outsiders. We were not suppliers. We were part of the MasterCard family. And so you can create that with gig workers, consultants, temporary workers, whatever you want to do. But you have to create that. And most don't.
And the gig workers will pick up on it right away.
Oh, God, yes. God, yes.
And by the way, as a recruiter, I can say this because it would be heresy in other circles, but the worst way to hire someone is through an interview. The best way to hire someone is through a temp job or a gig work or an interim assignment where you really see what they're made of.
We'll see what's happening.
Like hands on. That's right. You like it here. We like you here. Let's do it. And so now you're getting a better opportunity, but that's not how people, we got to reframe this from, oh, it's wrong. It's not the way it was. I'm sorry, it's not. But this, now you've got the greatest hiring potential, pool you've ever had.
Well, also,
and it's on you. Yeah.
Also, you and I had a side conversation about this after the last interview. I still think companies should experiment. Hire somebody, hire the director of marketing, hire the assistant director of marketing on a 2-year contract. And I think, when that 2 years is up, guess what? That person's going to be performing because there's no job security. That's a 2-year contract. You bring them in there and, you put senior people on 1 year, 2 year, 3 year contracts or whatever. And, experiment, put some people on 2-year contracts, 30-month contracts, whatever it is. And let's see what kind of perform. And then you can put them, rehire them for 5 years or rehire them for longer.
And then 6 months before it's expired, you both can either renegotiate or agree it's going to end. Yeah,
exactly. And then you get it's kind of like same way you lease an apartment or anything else, a house. You lease it for 2 years and you have to start renewing it 6 months before the lease expires.
Right.
So you know what you're going to be doing.
Stephen, have you ever had this experience? I did a TikTok about this. I got enormous commentary and following, which was, I was telling a story about one time I was in Canada and we had one of our, what we thought was a really high performing person say, I need to take a leave of absence for about 3 to 4 months for whatever reason. So we're like, oh no, it's going to be so brutal. We get a temp in there.
We are pleased to welcome Adamo Education as a proud sponsor of Global TV Talk Show.
The concept of a micro school is the reimagining of the one-room schoolhouse. My name is Tamara Becker. I'm the president and CEO of Adamo Education. The micro school concept really does not just lend itself to the personalization and the customization of learning, but also the social development and fostering that sense of love for learning. Unlike what we see in traditional brick and mortar schools, we have multiple grade levels in the same learning space. Students can be enriched by the socialization that they get, as well as the academic support from peers. What differentiates Adamo is the fact that we are taking the best pieces of brick and mortar, of digital, and then at-home learning. Students here can come 5 days a week. They can come 4 hours a day. It will really just depend on what is best for the student and for the parent. To enroll, just reach out via phone, text, or email, and we'll have that personalized conversation, and we'll be able to get you all set. Check us out at adamoeducation.org.
Hi, this is Ed, and I thank you for tuning in to Global TV Talk Show, a unit on globalbusinessnews.net. We broadcast to the world, as you know by now. So I wanted to make sure that you understand that our programs are advertising supported. We're grateful for co-sponsors, advertisers. They have a marketing budget, coupled with a strong desire to be associated with our top quality program. And of course, I'm grateful. Thank you. So for the next few minutes, you're going to see some commercials. It's mostly very low key. And Our prices are very, very reasonable. Our exposure for the advertisers go 12 months and beyond. Some of our advertisers have been with us since March, April of 2020. And Google Analytics has tracked over 125,000 what they call audience page views, which means you looking at this page, that's a page view. Now, if you happen to go to one of our other shows or to our radio broadcasts or to our newspaper or magazine, those become additional page views as measured by Google Analytics. And so when they say 125,000 since spring of 2020 up through Labor Day, a month ago, that's pretty good numbers. And the past 30 days, Google Analytics has measured just under 6,000 audience page views. And that, according to them, is a 42% increase in audience participation over the month of August. So thank you very much. Well, here's our advertisers, and we'll be back in just a couple of minutes or so, and we'll proceed with this interesting conversation. Thank you.
This episode from the meeting room of Global TV Talk Show is brought to you by
The Bridge School, the accredited international online private school of choice, at bridgek12.org.
Porch Light Rental and Destination Services. Reduce your renter lump sum or managed relocation costs. Visit them at porchlightrental.com.
And by airs.com. With our full range of services, we can help design and manage your international relocation. Find us at airs.com.
Primestone Partners, featuring corporate, government, and developer housing solutions, as well as senior-level advisory services. Find them at primestonepartners.com.
And by International Auto Source. We are the vehicle experts for expats, featuring all major brands of automobiles with flexible solutions and financing. On the web at intlauto.com.
Become a global player in your field.
Cross Culture to Go provides virtual support for your global business and career success.
We can help you thrive in 140 plus countries and markets.
On the web at crossculturetogo.com.
Something that's really neat is that the Bridge School partners with various organizations to provide learning for their students. For example, we partner with a major ballet company, and we are able to enroll several of their students into our school. So now not only is the student able to participate in a school and have a seamless transition while they're very active in their ballet career, but now they have other dancers that are with them that are doing some of the same courses. So it's almost becoming a camaraderie where they're taking similar courses, they're working together on their ballet, and really being able to form this great partnership with these organizations to provide a needed service. A lot of times there are student athletes who will spend hours and hours at the gym or at the basketball courts, wherever it is. And if they're attending a traditional school, they're in school from 8 to 3. They get a quick snack, and then they're at the gym for 3 to 4 hours in the evening. Coming to us and having that partnership, they're able to break that up throughout the day. They can have a morning practice, get some schooling in, have an afternoon practice, finish their schooling in the evening. So there's that flexibility. And additionally, if there are tournaments or performances, it's fantastic because if there's a week where they have shows straight through, they can take that week off of learning and then pick back up when they're done. So it offers this great flexibility. And for the program owners of these sports leagues, it is a win-win situation for them because they see this need. They see this need that their students need to make sure that they are obtaining the grades necessary to be successful adults in our country and in other countries. But it provides them an environment where they can be successful at both.
Hi, I'm Sergey Gorbatov.
I'm Angela Lane.
Together we're researchers, writers and practitioners in the field of human resources.
And we've also been multi-country, multi-assignment career expats.
We owe our professional development and growth to a very large extent to the international assignment opportunities that we have had.
But in a world where distributed work may become the norm, we also want to understand what will happen to the nature, duration, and purpose of international assignments.
Together with our colleague, Julian Dalzell from the University of South Carolina, we're undertaking a study on the future of expatriation.
And we'd value your contribution. You can participate in this important study by completing a simple 10-minute questionnaire.
Access the questionnaire by typing in your browser tinyurl.com/expert study. That's tinyurl.com/expert study. You can also find the link here on Ed's website next to this video.
Thank you for joining us in this study. In return for your contribution, we'll provide you with a copy of our research.
And of course, you'll be invited to an exclusive webinar hosted by Ed, where we will share our findings right here on Global Business News.
And so please go to tinyurl.com/expat study. Take the survey so that we can better understand the future of expatriation.
I want to throw out an idea at Steve, because Ed and I've talked about this a little bit in other shows.
Sure.
He likes to throw the phrase out. Steven wants to blow up the HR department. And I actually, it's really more like reconstituting it. So here's an idea for you, Steve.
Okay.
And I said this in a keynote speech recently to a bunch of entrepreneurs. I said, and this is like point number 5 of things you need to do to be successful. And the point was, I want you to go back to the office tomorrow, back to work tomorrow, and I want you to fire your HR department. And then I hesitate, obviously. And then they're all looking like, was he crazy? What did he say? I said, yeah, fire your HR. But then hire them back 30 minutes later as the human capability department. And their focus is to motivate, recruit, teach team building skills, all that sort of stuff, teach resiliency, help the marketing director with well-being stuff, and take all the operations part of HR, all the paperwork, all the policies, procedure, and put that under the operations vice president, something like that. So Ed says, I want to blow it up. I say, I want to reconstitute it and call it the human capabilities department. So what do you think?
Okay. How much time do we have? Because this is, all right. So I think the origin of that sentiment, I want to blow up HR, comes from lots of different factors. Human resources has the unfortunate task of being both a nurturing department, like we want to make people better, but we also have compliance. So I'm like, hey, Ed, let's talk about your recruiting. How's it going? And then, by the way, there's been a complaint about, sexual harassment against someone on your team. And you're like, what? Or Ed comes to me and says, hey, Steve, I like to promote Jim. And I go, sorry, Ed, Susie and Sarah are more qualified than Jim. So I can't let you do that. I'm not going to support that because you're going to get blowback and the women on the team are going to think that you're favoring men. So what HR has, unfortunately, is a place where hard conversations happen. And it's also an extremely easy department to blame. And I'll give you an example when I think I took the heat massively unfairly. When we were growing like crazy at LinkedIn, our biggest organization dysfunction, if you will, or shortfall of our expectations was recruiting. Okay. Of course, we're in the shadows of sexier brands, paying more with better benefits, better work environments, better bonuses, better comp, everything. And they're like, hey, okay, your team's like broken. You're not hiring people fast enough. And I said, well, your hiring managers are MIA. Candidates don't want to hear from a recruiter. They want to hear from the hiring manager. And so they're like, well, it's your team. And so when I look at every tech company, every tech recruiting leader at Facebook, Twitter, Apple has been fired several times. Why? Because leaders are not owning it. And so what I tried to do at LinkedIn was say, okay, we're an enabling department. We're not the owning department. HR shouldn't own culture. As soon as you say HR owns culture or HR owns diversity, you're transferring the ownership away from leaders, and that's wrong.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's wrong. The best work I ever did, and I'm happy to say it, and it's also probably heresy for a lot of HR people who are insecure. The best work I ever did was in companies where the leadership team owned the talent strategy, not HR. And they got it. We want to be great in culture. We want to be a great place to work. I'm like, okay, great. I got some ideas, but thank you for owning that with me. And so this is why, people are frustrated. And the other thing is that honestly, few people have seen HR really rock and roll and be additive. It's more like you're blocking me. You're putting policies in that are sort of, energy vampiring me. Like, what are you doing? And that's why I think I was able to make a name for myself was I'm like, hey, I broke more policies than I made. I had more situations come to my office and I go, you're right. That policy is completely not for this situation. Let's make an exception, or we're going to do it this way. Or you're right. We screwed up. I'm sorry. What can we do better? Versus, all these HR departments that you read about at places like Uber, where, they just rush it under the carpet. And if you raise your hand, there's a problem, they take you out versus, and the other thing is, and so I'm just laying a backdrop, like, why is HR so easily in the crosshairs? The other thing is the HR department touches more culturally meaningful moments than any other department. Who's getting hired? Who's getting promoted? Who's getting salary budget? Who's getting, more resources? That's, got to get a blessing from someone in HR. And I've seen unfortunately, many people wield that in a way that's overly political or self-serving rather than the good of the company, right? And I think if you're good in HR, you're trying to work yourself out of a job. You're trying to make other people better. But I'm definitely an outlier in that conversation. And I think, and here's another one where I think people totally get it wrong. It's like, well, who's HR working for? Are you the employee advocate? I go, well, is this a union shop? Who is the employee paying me, or is the company paying me? And so a lot of people say, well, HR is you're there to make us happy, employees happy. I go, no, I do not believe that. HR is here to help us win. Now, happiness tends to be often connected with winning, but it's not the goal. Winning's the goal. And that means we got to have hard conversations, and we got to make difficult decisions, and we got to say no sometimes for the betterment. And that's why there's a guy, I was on his podcast. His podcast is called something like Happy at Work. And I said, hey, I really think you should change this, because I think that's an unrealistic goal, because success comes from really hard stuff. Sometimes it's not always about being happy. And he never wrote me back after I said that. So I don't know, but I appreciate that, where that's coming from, because I've been in places where, I wanted to run screaming from the building. The HR organization I was with was just, I think, wired wrong. I will throw aspersions at one company, Cisco, and this is probably, and not all the time I was there, but when I left that company, the HR senior leadership felt we're smarter than the business. They don't know what they're doing. We're going to tell them what to do. And I was like, what? That's dangerous. Really? And so I'm like, okay, this is not a team that I want to play on anymore. But I like how you phrase that. And a function's got a problem when there's like 700 different titles now: chief enablement officer, chief people officer, chief engagement officer,
chief talent officer,
and I was like, whoa, there's an identity crisis, because the sad thing is more people know what they don't want from HR than what they do.
Yeah. And I say that to spark some thinking around it. Which is what
Same
we need.
here.
Yeah.
Same here. Same here. And it's a good conversation.
Yeah.
But Ed, it's got to start with, I have a friend in Silicon Valley, and he's like, we don't have an HR department. And he was like ready for a fight. And I'm going, great. That's awesome. Good for you. And he was like, well, I thought you, like, no, man, if you guys want to own it, then you should own it. You should do that for any function, that's great. And the fact that you want to do that, I was like, I have enormous respect for your organization. That's really cool. Yeah.
Well, it's been a fast moving show, and I thank you so much. This is, I've learned a lot. I'm just taking it all in. And so come back again. Please.
Thanks for having me. I always enjoy these conversations, and I
Thank
really
you.
like how you're opening up the conversations on talking about hard stuff, which is what we got to get better
That's
at
what we
right
gotta
now.
do.
For
Thank
So
sure.
you.
when's the next book coming out?
I'm looking to finish send it to the publisher at the end of this year. That's my
Excellent.
goal right now. Yeah. So I got about 11 more months to get this thing rock and rolling.
Good on you. All right.
Good
I
luck.
look forward to it.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, you
Thank
guys.
you, Steve. Thank you,
Thanks,
Steve.
Steve. Thanks, Ed.
Take care. Take care. Keep working.
Always.
Thank you for joining us in the meeting room at Global TV Talk Show.
Have a wonderful day, and stay safe.